Hello, everyone. Today we have the great pleasure of hosting the interview, the presentation of Jonna Bornemark. She works at Southern University in Sweden. Uh, what to say about her? I mean, I invited her because I had the pleasure to work with her and to come in contact with the messages she put through in the world, and I would really like to know her better and to share with you uh, my knowledge of her. She worked on Eros, philosophy of religion, pregnancy, animals, and in particular horses. So, I mean, her array of research is really wide. And thank you, Jonna, for being here today with us.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
So, I don't know, I would like to start our conversation about asking you what are the messages from philosophy that you care more about. So I know that you are often guests of the radio programs in Sweden, or divulgative programs for philosophy, not necessarily only for philosophy. What are the messages that today you feel are more important for the audience?
Hmm. This is a very big
I
question.
know you can
But
take it from wherever you like.
yes, I think I have several aims. To begin
Hmm.
with, I have my two latest books. They were sort of philosophical critique against contemporary society and how we organize work, actually. And a critique against fundamentalistic rationality and focus on
Hmm.
activity and what we call new public management, etc. And this, so I wrote about the immeasurable in
Eh,
relation, yeah, in
please
kind
tell us something about that. What's the problem with measures? What do you think with numbers?
yes. Actually, there's no problem with measurement as
Yes.
such, but there is a problem when you think that everything can and should be measured, and that when it's only real if you can measure it, or actually if you do measure it. So this is the problem. But we also live in very dichotomous times. So when you say that you're interested in the unmeasurable, people immediately question, don't you like measurements? And you're against measuring? It's like, no, that's not what I said. I said that's not all there is to the world. And
Right.
in Sweden, we have there is a very huge experience among so many people that our systems are too rationalized,
Hmm.
and that they can't use their judgment. They only have to follow manuals, and that they become, well, machine-like. That they're
Hmm.
not, their human capacities are not asked for. And this, now I'm talking about like teachers, doctors,
Yes.
nurses, people in elderly care. I mean, professions that really demand a human presence. And so this tension, I actually, coming back to your main question here, um, when there are tensions, experiences that are under verbalized,
Hmm.
that is present in many fields. I also think this way about pregnancy. It's
Hmm.
also an experience that so many people have. Well, we're all born to begin with, um, and many of us have given birth. And yet it's an experience that is not taken into account in philosophy, in the way we understand what life is, and so on. And so I understand also that as an under-verbalized area. And I think
Hmm.
this is my task. This is my task, to pick up on these experiences, try to verbalize them, try to show what is going on within these. I think this is my profession, and my job is not to talk to other people that have read the same books as I have in like an ivory tower. and
Right.
write for this audience. I can do that, and of course we need to do that as well in order to kind of explore. Well, if I read Nicholas of Cusa, and then I need to have a room where I can discuss Nicholas of Cusa with others that knows about Nicholas of Cusa, sure, but I can't stay there.
Mhm.
And this is why I like to do stuff in media and write for a much broader audience, because I think it's my job actually. And also one last thing, I think it's really interesting to see where, in which medias can you talk about philosophy?
Mm. Mhm.
Because I've also entered, like, to begin with, I was we have one radio program called The Philosophical Room, which is
Ah,
like
beautiful.
the
Yeah.
philosophy show
Uh-huh.
in Swedish media.
Uh-huh.
And of course I can talk philosophy there. But after that, I started to kind of accept invitations from very different kind of medias that aren't really philosophical, and try to talk. I only accept if I can talk philosophy somehow. And they want me to do that. And it's actually, sometimes it's difficult, but my experience is also that um, there are angles that we learn in humanities
Mhm.
that can be connected to themes everyone is interested in, and we can kind of turn it around a bit and look at it from a different angle, connect it to an existential dimension, a metaphysical dimension, do something more, see what's really in it. So I do
Yeah.
think we as a profession, we have a capacity that is also underused.
Yeah, I can completely relate to what you're saying, and I'm really glad that you're doing it because yeah, there's not so much space often left for this verbalization activity. I mean, what was the most difficult topic or concept for you to verbalize for the larger audience? What do you think?
Mm. Actually, maybe it was pregnancy, because it took
Mm.
me 20 years to write the book.
20 years.
I
Oh,
started 20 years ago, when I was actually 22 now, when I was pregnant with my first son. And
uh-huh.
my experience was, I tried to write about it in using my philosophical tools.
Mhm.
Uh, I try, and I was a student back then, and I tried to um, use the language that existed in my academical environment, and
Uh,
I failed. I failed so hard. It was so bad, and I was so frustrated. And
oh,
then actually what I did was to write some poetry, because in poetry, and it was not for publication, of course, it was
uh-huh.
just I needed to verbalize this.
Uh-huh.
uh,
Yeah.
and then some words here, some words there, a sentence here, and it didn't matter if it kind of was an argument. I just needed to get it out. And then I
Yeah.
kept doing that. I've been pregnant 3 times, and that's the only times I've written poetry. And then slowly I could move from poetry to essays.
Uh-huh.
We had more of a well, a line,
Mhm.
more of an argument. And then in this book now, finally, I'm writing theses. In the end, I want to kind of make a standpoint.
Of
This is
course.
how we can end it, to kind of, yeah, not just say nuanced things. There is this and there is that, but also say this means we should think in this way.
And what do you think is the main concepts that you came to realization that were buried behind the words and then you managed to bring to words? What are the main ideas, messages?
Maybe when it comes to words, I like to invent new words.
Uh-huh.
When it comes to this formalism, effectivity, I talked a lot about empaperment,
Mm.
that all knowledge should be take place in text or in
Mm.
numbers. You can't have just knowledge in the body or in the judgment or in sensibility or in
Mhm.
emotions that
Mhm.
is made totally invisible in the systems that we live in. And
Mm.
there I felt that I both needed to formulate new words, and I did this, of course, in Swedish. To give new concepts is so much easier in your mother tongue. of
Yeah.
course, but also then to give power to certain concepts that are already present. So I worked a lot with professional judgment, and that is a word that everyone knows, that we need a doctor or a teacher with judgment. I don't want to go to a doctor without judgment, right?
Uh-huh. Yeah,
We
yeah.
all understand that sounds dangerous. So in a way, we know judgment is
Uh-huh.
important. But what I did is to kind of go into, but what is judgment then? And I have sort of my own theory about that. But one more word I could connect to, where I really felt the need to formulate a new concept, is actually trying to verbalize what you do when you give birth. And you
Yeah.
know, you read the text about this. So
Yes, 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 yes. Please tell us.
yeah. Because giving birth, this was one of the things that I failed with in the beginning when I tried to write about this. I was writing about it in terms of passivity and activity,
Mm.
and neither kind of works, because when the labor comes, in a way I'm passive, sure, because these powers also, they don't really come from me, that they come from somewhere far beyond any kind of me. In giving birth, the labor so very much come from beyond me. I'm not in control. I'm not. It's not even that it comes from like my body. The experience of the waves of labor is that they sort of come from life itself, that goes
Mhm.
through all these individuals, one after the
Incredible.
other, in a
Hmm.
way, from before we were
Yeah.
humans, so to say,
Yeah.
until through the mammals into the humans, and through me moving forward into the future. So
Yeah.
this is a power that is really, I'm just a part of this. And at the same time, I'm not passive either,
Hmm.
because I'm not this. In Swedish, we have this. It's very easy to play with the words, because we have the active and passive giving. A male doctor is delivering the baby, and the
Ah.
woman is passive in that wording. Whereas you also
Hmm.
have to give birth is, of course, active. And I
Hmm.
found it problematic that we have to choose either to be active or passive.
Completely.
And and here, when the waves come, when the labor comes, I can breathe through it to stop it, to not make it push, or I
Yeah.
can ah! use it to keep
Yeah.
on the moving, and push forth the baby.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, so this means I'm not passive. I'm giving birth,
Yeah.
but
Very
it's
much.
here I felt the need to talk about pactivity.
Hmm.
So connecting, taking the power that comes from life itself, but using it, doing something with it. So
Hmm.
this term, then I felt more comfortable in relation to, yes, to me, this describes
Hmm.
the activity of giving birth. It's a pactive movement. And then I started to think about, well, riding a horse is a pactive
Ah.
movement, because
Ah.
the movement comes from somewhere else. I'm not, I don't have, if I'm on top of it, it's the horse that has its feet in the ground and it's moving us forth. But yet I can use these powers, this movement, I can give it a certain direction. So,
Hmm.
so I'm not passive, it's a pactive movement in the same way. And also just in a dialogue, I need to listen to you. I can't decide what you're going to say, but I can take it on. Hopefully I listen to what you say. I can
Yeah.
use it, and I can pactively send it back to you. And also, as cultural beings, we are pactive. I haven't decided where I'm born, or
Hmm.
what my tradition has done earlier. I
Hmm.
happen to be born into a misogynic and racist culture. It still lingers. We're
Oh,
not
really?
rid of, well,
Okay.
yeah, we belong to the Western society.
I know.
It
Yeah.
still lingers. It still lingers, right?
Hmm.
Uh, and it's there. And also in relation to this sort of cultural heritage, I am pactive. I am part of this tradition, but I can do something with it. I can give it a different direction.
Yeah.
So I have enjoyed using that word, and it pops up in many different situations. I find it useful to also, it means I'm not either a victim or a perpetrator.
Mm-hmm.
I can be actively part of something,
Completely.
and it means responsibility, and it means continuing at the same time.
This is a great example of verbalization that of the verbalization that you mentioned before. Thanks. And it's something that is real, even if you cannot measure it. You cannot put a number on it. You don't decide the success of a delivery or the beauty of a ride on your horse based on a number or a measurement. Is something active that
Mm,
also shows us how we are nature and subjects of these natures at the same time, that
yes.
we
And
are part.
yes, and it's of course also a nature culture
Hmm.
concept, which kind of ties these things together. And I think also in relation to like sexuality or gender, you can think in this way. I am born a certain way, but I can do stuff with it, which also of course depends on the technology available.
You wrote also about sexuality and eros. Speaking of which, you wrote about fantasy, erotic fantasies, and yeah, you thematized the problem of gender in the language also of the fantasies. Was it difficult to write? Are you happy with what you achieved in that writing?
In that article,
Yes,
actually that the article you're thinking about, it was quite a while ago
it's a
uh,
bit ago. Uh-huh.
now. Yeah. uh, but I'm happy. Of course it would have looked different if I wrote about it today, but I'm happy with it. When it comes to the erotic and sexuality, it's interesting from a philosophical point of view, because you can't write about it totally in a totally dry way,
Mm-hmm.
in a very analyzing, totally outside of the atmosphere, the stimmung of the
Mm-hmm.
theme. But you
Hmm.
can't write porn either, right?
No, you can't.
No, that wouldn't be philosophy, to kind of go into the sexual mood and just be horny. But you can't be totally without it either. And
Yeah.
I kind of find that tension exciting.
Ah, aha.
Yes, because I want to, and here, uh, well, writing porn is for like sexual arousement, and the text I'm writing does not have that
Quality.
purpose.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, but I still have to go into what it feels like, what that
Mm.
atmosphere is like.
Mm-hmm.
I have to explore how sensibility works. I have to write and be very close to it. And after this article, I also wrote actually poetry about it, and thematize it in a different way, pretty much in the same way as in relation to pregnancy, that by writing some sort of poetry, some sort of very closeness to the phenomena, I need to, to
I
be very
know.
close, and then I can back off and look at what
Mm-hmm.
happens here, and the analyze, or the theorizing, or the distanced gaze is not, it doesn't say everything that is there, but it says something, and it says something different. And to me, I also want to bring that gaze into saying it's not just about sexuality, it's about how human belongs together, it's about what sensibility is, it's about metaphysical questions,
Mm-hmm.
pretty much like in pregnancy. To me, it's all about what kind of logic we use. So I don't want to kind of stay, when I talk about erotic, it's about erotic, and pregnancy is about pregnancy, and horses is about horses. I want to draw metaphysical insights from these practices.
What do you mean by metaphysical?
Mm, mm. Uh, Maybe I should take that logic stuff as example, that's logic, but it still says something about, metaphysical, logical, epistemological, maybe. So basic philosophical questions. So when it comes to logic in pregnancy, we often start out from the Aristotelian x equals x. Sorry, may I do, I know this.
Absolutely. Go ahead. Yes.
A pencil and a paper for those of you that are listening to this, but I will explain what I do. But for those that have it on image, this is easier. We have a logic of x equal x that is so basic for Western formalized thinking. And also, I think it says something, what is real? What is real is what can have an identity that is kind of closed within itself. It doesn't really relate to Y or Q or other stuff. First, we have an identity, and then that can relate to other stuff. So we live very much with this idea how things are separated from each other. And this was one of my problems then when I started to think about pregnancy, because it's a lie. It doesn't work that way. In pregnancy, X doesn't equal X. I don't, there is no self. Suddenly, me, I am in relation to the fetus, I'm a landscape. Yeah. I'm a landscape without the border, and I'm warmth and water and limitation and nurturing, etc. So it's a very different thing. What am I if I'm a landscape? And what is the words doesn't work here, because it's not a me that is this in relation to the fetus. It's a system of its own, which it's very difficult to count. Are we one? Are we two? Are we three? I don't really know. So here I used Nicholas of Cusa's ideas about logic instead, which, well, to make it very short here, one thing sort of goes into the other. And now I'm painting for those very strange blobs, where, think about the lava lamp, where you have, in Swedish I talk about it as blobs, actually, which is separated from lava and then melts into another. And Cusa has a very good terminology for this sort of relationships, where simply we do the reality, I would say, is analog, degrees, becoming, growing. This is why it's so difficult with abortion, actually, much more difficult than we sometimes pretend it is, because there is no clear line when to abort and when not to. No one would accept that I aborted my 20-year-old son, right? That would be murder. Well, so where to draw the line? And because there is no, the birth is not like, it's the same child before and the day after and the day before. So there is no clear line. And today in Sweden, we draw the line when the child can survive outside of the womb. But that is also using technology. And suddenly we have a technology that can save an egg and a sperm and make that into a child. Technology improves, right? Would that mean that there are no abortions anymore? And still, abortion is important. Children should be loved. Children should have a room, a space. We need to have space for our children. And especially this slowly becoming. So here we have a logic of analogy, whereas the law demands a line. So when I draw these blobs that are all connected to each other, language sort of cut them off from each other. And that can be really important. And this is what humans do. We use language to sort of cut off the blobs. And it's especially the more formalized the language, the more we do it. In poetry, language can be more blob-like. Right?
Yeah.
That's why verbalization in different difficult areas needs to somehow start with poetry, to me. but this also, sometimes we have blobs that we haven't really thought about, that it becomes invincible, invisible,
Invisible.
not invincible, sorry,
Who knows?
invisible. And then we sort of really need to, then language is a power, and we
Mm,
can kind of show, no, there is something here. We can
mhm,
point by means of language. So language is important. Language is, this doesn't mean that language is bad. Language
mhm,
is moving into an x equals x, but
mhm.
the starting point in the logic of life, which is fluent. And I think this tension, this is what I mean. This was an example. This is what I mean when I say that these specific experiences, like pregnancy, like horse riding, like sex, there are philosophical lessons to learn. They say something about what reality is like,
Mhm,
what is true, what is real. These are the
mhm,
questions. These very abstract also and big
mhm.
questions, I think, should also be thought about from these specific experiences.
Absolutely. And you cannot see them yet. I mean, in your article, you were talking about how male centric is a discussion of pleasure and eros, for
Mm,
example.
mm, yes.
And yeah, we still don't know what a female fantasy, right, can be in pornography,
Yeah.
because pornography is mostly male oriented.
Yes.
And philosophy might help to create that language for that invisible
Yes.
area. Or
And
in your beautiful article on again Kusa's logic and pregnancy, yeah, you showed very clearly how the principle of non-contradiction of Aristotle doesn't hold in pregnancy, because you can be a person and another person at once. You can be A and B at the same
mm,
time,
yes.
which is a beautiful logical contradiction, but we need to be able to entertain this
Mm,
reality, because
yes.
that's exactly what it is.
Yes.
Sorry,
And
I saw that.
no, that's very nicely put, and good examples. I think philosophy is here to kind of keep us in touch with reality, because language can kind of take off, and we take it for granted, and we think that we know what we're talking about, and we don't see the what is kind of steering us, and which phenomena becomes really big and obvious, and others that becomes invincible.
Mhm.
Sorry.
Invisible, it's okay.
It's kind of
Maybe
funny
they
that
want to be invincible
they
too.
want to
Who
become
knows?
invincible, but they are very invisible.
But they are very invisible yet.
In the end,
Yeah.
they are invincible because they are there. And so I do think that philosophy has a very specific task here, and a job to do that will never go away also, because the world is continually new, and language continually kind of gets old.
Completely. Yeah. We need to change our thoughts like we change our clothes, because at some point they stink and we want to be fit
Yes.
for this world. Moving the focus a little, speaking from woman to woman, personally, you look to me like the successful woman. You managed to have your family, to have your job, to do a job you are very passionate about.
Yes.
Do you think we women have to choose either our job or our family, either our passion or our, traditional life? It seems
Mm,
at least the pressure I feel in keep going into especially philosophical research, that at some point I have to make the choice.
yeah.
What's your personal experience? How was it for you? Do we have to make this choice? Can we have it all, or it's like Prometheus uh, defying the gods if we do so?
That it's a political question to a large extent. How do we organize the society when it comes to childcare, when it comes to like maternity leave? In Sweden, we have, well, you can make it into like 18 months, not full paid, but enough to live on. And then we often share it. So the man and the woman, if we are in a heterosexual relationship, take like half each. And a lot of dads do that also in Sweden. I mean, the question should go both ways, right? Normally at least two parties involved in the bringing up a child. And so it's not just a question if a woman can be both a professor of philosophy and a mother. The father of two of my children, he's also a professor of philosophy, and no one would ask him that question, right? So
Right.
that
Yeah.
it just shows that it's a political question. And it is, of course, it's a question we need to keep fighting for. But nevertheless, I would say, it is still also beyond that politics. It's not an easy question, because spending, if you want to like make a career and you want to travel around, and I know a lot of women also have to kind of not spend as much time with their children as they would like, even if they have the help. And here, of course, maybe we need to think about what an academical career is. Is it really important? How many articles do you need to produce? How much teaching should be in there? I mean, it should be, I think humans are amazing because we can organize our lives in so many different ways. Of course, we can organize our lives in a way so that we can do philosophy and raise a child. Of course, we can do that. But but I think we need to kind of think about it in both ends. How like Husserl, the stories about Edmund Husserl there in the beginning of the 20th century is that he like worked all around the clock. As all his woken time he was writing, and it was always writing from the beginning again, trying to find the beginning anew. And is this the only way to do philosophy? Or do you gain more insights by spending time with your children, seeing the nature from the eyes of an autistic 4-year-old might give you more philosophical insights than spending hours after hours in front of your desk? So what is good? What is quality here? Maybe spending time doing other stuff makes you a so much better philosopher, a much more relevant philosopher. So but then again, I must say that it is, when it comes to pregnancy, and I think philosophy can change a lot by picking up on that experience, because throughout the history, not only that men have been the philosophers, but also that the women that have been in philosophy are the ones that didn't get any children. The nuns during the medievals, for example, and also in the 20th century, well, Hannah Arendt, Simone de Beauvoir, Simone Weil, all the big philosophers in the beginning of it are the ones that never got any children. And I think like Lucy Irigaray and Julia Kristeva would be like the first ones that they had children. Lucy Irigaray is very private, so I'm actually not sure about that. But she writes about it, and Kristeva writes about it, and she had a child. So it influences philosophy once. And now in the 21st century, we see sort of a wave of philosophers, both male and female, writing about pregnancy. So I think we are part of a movement where this experience also can influence what you can't just say that X equals X and a human being is this autonomous being, because that's not where we start. And that experience stays with us.
That's so true. I wonder if coming back to what you were saying before, if this influenced also the areas we verbalized. I mean, we fostered a kind of a worldview that is very much based on people who had a totalizing relationship with philosophy, focusing on that piece of paper, trying to write and write and write in the ivory tower, and spending little time outside their world with their family, with their beloved ones, or so on. And probably we didn't verbalize enough of what it is about familial love,
Mhm.
about daily exchanges, and so on.
Mhm.
Probably, yeah, there's
And
still
also, I
much.
think to me, philosophy is always political. And if you're locked up in an ivory tower, you're not in contact with which questions are important today, and to really do something in that political field, and with philosophy being political, I mean that exactly what we pick up on. Kusa has this wonderful expression of quidditas, the whatnesses. We
Mhm.
live in a world that always expands beyond our horizons. The world is always bigger than our knowledge, right? So,
Fortunately.
yes. So, what we pick up, what we have this desire to thematize, is always political, because it shapes what the world looks like. So political in that in that sense, that it's we are part of creating a world that becomes this world rather than that world. So here I think it's both a sorry, a responsibility, but also um, a need to kind of have this sensibility that is connected to your desire. And here, of course, we need to be different from each other and have different themes, and pick up on different things, and also have then really come from different backgrounds, to have different family histories, have not just come from the same class, same color, same gender. Then we
Okay.
become much poorer.
And biodiversity is a problem on any level of our society, again.
Mm,
Hence, my question for you is the diversity then just a label? What is diversity for you? What
mm.
does it represent?
Yes, yes, and I think sometimes at our universities today that
Eh,
we have more of a diversity. There's a lot of women in Sweden. We have much more female students than male now. Also
oh,
among the PhD students, we have more female PhD students in Sweden than male right now. Yes, and it's continuing in that direction, and that is of course dangerous as well in
yes.
the end if it kind of continues,
Yeah.
right? Um, so that sort of diversity we reach. There's also more people from other ethnicities than the classical Swedish. So we have more, and there's definitely more homosexuals or openly homosexuals and other sexualities. So in a way, the diversity looks better on the paper, and
Mm.
yet it sometimes can feel that everyone behaves the same, have the same social skills. During the 19th, when I was a student, there were, professors with rubber boots and a plastic bag and the hair going like this, and just being very strange people. They would never get
That's
that far today. So
uh-huh.
where are our strange people that is also maybe be autistic, for
Eh,
example? So we lose the neurodiversity when we go for another kind of diversity. So I think it's important to keep on. We're never finished. We need to think about uh, what sort of social norms are we creating now, and who fits into them, and how can we. Social norms are we can't live without them, and we can't live within them. We need to kind of bend and poke and make it, yeah, make a fuss
right.
about continually. Diversity and multiplicity and differences has a metaphysical value on
Mm.
its own, because it makes the world as such richer, and also also it is rich. The world is already rich. So do we want to see it or not? Can we embrace this multiplicity, this vastness that the world is, that existence is? And yeah, then we have to keep not locking it up, but have Yeah, I think you understood my.
Absolutely, and I can't agree more with what you're saying. Actually, look, I saw that some years ago now you were the panelist for the Nobel Prize for discussions around the Nobel Prize. How was that experience? How is the sense of diversity there? I mean, right? That's what I was thinking because, the Nobel Prize is another normative way in which we recognize the excellence of the reality of our society. Do we have some kind of biodiversity there? What's your feeling?
Yes, actually, it was a very interesting
Ah,
experience. The theme was not knowing,
uh,
which is connected I talked a lot about and wrote about not knowing. So that was sort of why I was there. But I must say, the whole event gave me a bit of a bitter taste,
mm,
actually. I met a lot of really nice people, and I spoke a lot, especially with two women of color. Uh, um, but I couldn't get rid of the feeling that they were invited as some
mm,
sort of alibi, because
mm.
the power are in the hands of others. And also at the dinner, this big fancy Nobel Prize gala dinner, which is like the party of the parties. And of course, this is it's I come from more like a working class background. We're not poor, but we don't have that sort of money. But and to see money in this way, in this scale, I'm just not used to it. And it's such an upper class
Mm,
thing, of course. And also a lot of the people in the audience, they have sort of bought their way in there to this dinner.
mm,
Others have others are alibis, but it's a certain order, and I haven't really formulated. Maybe I shouldn't say these things. These what I say now is totally based on feelings and experiences that I had.
huh,
It's not an analyze of who was there and what color and representation, blah blah, etc. I haven't done any of that work. This is just my uh,
impression.
yes, this is just my impression. But
Hmm.
it was, and at the same time, I love it. The parts that I really loved is where science gets uh, elevated. Gets this is so important. Look, we
Exactly.
gather around these scientifical explorations, and we do this, and it's fantastic, and it's huge. And I really enjoyed that emotion and that sort of Stimmung that
Hmm.
I felt there.
The sacrality of knowledge and science,
Mm.
it's somewhat kept there, although with some contrasts,
Yes, of
apparently.
course. And it's very difficult not to think about the Bourdieuan analyze about social, cultural capital and economical capital and how they sort of translate into each other. All this play of power, it's always there when it is this sort of high prestige environment.
Of course.
And well, that's the way human works sometimes, even though we can be differently. I think this also in a way stays.
Yeah, yeah, I completely see it. It's still part of our job to break that categories too and see where it leads. Look,
Mm.
time flew by. I'm getting ready for my last question. It was a great pleasure talking to you today. My last ritual question for this podcast is always, what do you think it's the meaning of life? Do you think life has a meaning? What's your take on that?
My take is that the meaning of life is to create meaning.
Hmm.
Uh, Life is meaningful. If life is not meaningful, you die. Life as such is meaningful. And that meaning can be uh, moving with your desires. I mean, we have desires, emotions, that they point the way, that they point what, they say what is important. And humans kind of move away from that and think, well, that's just the body, it needs to be something bigger, something abstract.
Hmm.
And I think sometimes we get a bit too smart for our own convenience in a way, or too abstract. Abstraction is kind of um, getting rid of the
Out
body,
of the
getting
head.
rid, yes, stay too brainy.
Mhm,
This is what I meant by too smart, too
mhm,
brainy. And I think if you don't feel a meaning in your life, you need to just be sensitive to sensibility. Where is the meaning? Where are
mhm,
my enjoyments?
mhm,
How can I also make that maybe larger, start working for it? The enjoyment is, of course, not only in stuff like eating and hanging around with your children or having sex. Enjoyment is, of course, in relating to other people, changing the way we understand the world, the enjoyment of words, of finding it's such an enjoyment in verbalizing stuff that you yourself haven't really understood
mhm.
before, or have just been this dim thing, and suddenly it gets a shape.
Yeah.
Maybe that's another short answer to your question. It's to be part of a shape creating. I like
Mm.
shapes,
Mhm, mhm,
and shapes in movement.
mhm. That's
That's
really beautiful.
to be abstract.
Well, it's a very concrete consensus as well, because it comes
Yes.
from real life, from our guts, and somehow there's the miracle of giving a shape to all these confusion that we have inside.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's really
And giving
beautiful.
a shape to yourself, giving the shape to a thought, to another baby, to a piece of art, to a meal.
Hmm. Yeah, yeah, you were mentioning before being able to look at the world through your 4 years old. Yeah, it's it's magical because it gives you the chance to live more than one life in this
Yes,
way.
yes, exactly.
Yeah, makes you wider, bigger. Thank you so much, Jonna. It was a great, great pleasure to have you here today.
Great pleasure to talk to you, Susie.